Many people believe that when an avoidant comes back, it is automatically a happy ending. They believe the waiting is finally over. They believe the silence, confusion, and heartbreak have finally led to the moment they wanted. But one of the most overlooked truths in relationship psychology is that an avoidant returning is not always a sign of change. In fact, some of the most painful relationship cycles begin the moment an avoidant comes back. That is why the question is not whether they miss you. The question is not whether they regret losing you. And the question is not even whether they still care. The real question is whether they deserve access to you again. When an avoidant returns, most people make the same mistake. They immediately focus on how to keep the avoidant from leaving again. They become so relieved to see the door reopen that they forget to ask why it closed in the first place. They focus on getting another chance while ignoring the lessons that the previous experience taught them. Yet the strongest people often do the opposite. They stop asking how to keep someone. They start asking whether keeping that person is actually healthy. And that shift changes everything. What makes this topic so important is that avoidants rarely return in the way people expect. Many come back carrying the same fears, the same habits, and the same emotional patterns that caused the distance before. Some genuinely want to reconnect. Some feel lonely. Some miss the comfort of a familiar connection. Some return because they finally realize what they lost. But returning and changing are not the same thing. Missing someone and being capable of building a healthy relationship with them are not the same thing. This is a distinction that many people discover far too late. In today's video, we are going to uncover the psychology behind why avoidants come back, why so many people get trapped in the same cycle after giving another chance, and why rejection is sometimes the most powerful response available. You will learn how to tell the difference between real growth and temporary regret. You will learn why emotional reactions often give away your power. You will learn how healthy boundaries expose the truth faster than long conversations ever could. Most importantly, you will learn how to reject an avoidant the right way, if that is the decision that protects your peace, your self-respect, and your future. There is a side of this conversation that very few people discuss, and by the end of this video, you may see avoidant behavior, reconciliation, and personal healing in a completely different light. The final lesson is especially important because it reveals why some people feel more empowered after walking away than they ever felt while trying to hold on. So stay with us until the end, because each part of this story builds on the next, and the final insight could completely change the way you respond if an avoidant suddenly reappears in your life. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy deep insights into relationships, attachment styles, psychology, and personal growth, make sure to subscribe and join our community for more videos that help you understand people, protect your peace, and build stronger emotional boundaries. Let's begin. One of the biggest misunderstandings about avoidance is the belief that once they leave, they are gone forever. Many people picture avoidants as cold, detached individuals who never look back. But real human psychology is usually more complicated than that. Avoidants often leave relationships not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much. As emotional intimacy grows, it creates a level of vulnerability that can feel overwhelming. What feels like closeness to one person can feel like pressure to an avoidant. What feels like connection can feel like a loss of freedom. As emotions become more intense, many avoidants experience an internal conflict. Part of them wants connection. Another part wants distance. And when that conflict becomes uncomfortable enough, distance often wins. The moment they pull away, they usually experience relief. The difficult conversations disappear. The emotional expectations disappear. The pressure they felt begins to fade. For a while, the distance seems to solve the problem. This is why many avoidants genuinely believe leaving is the right decision in the moment. They feel lighter. They feel calmer. They feel like they can breathe again. But there is another side to distance that often arrives later. Distance removes pressure, but it also removes connection. It removes familiarity. It removes comfort. It removes the person who was once part of everyday life. What initially felt like freedom slowly starts feeling like loss. This is where many people misunderstand what happens inside an avoidant after separation. They assume the avoidant completely forgets the relationship and moves on without a second thought. Yet many avoidants spend weeks, months, or even years reflecting on connections they walked away from. They remember conversations. They remember support. They remember the feeling of having someone who cared. Human beings naturally adapt to what is present in their lives. Often, People only fully recognize the value of something after it is gone. Avoidants are not immune to this reality. Over time, memories begin to replace the pressure they once felt. The arguments become less vivid. The emotional intensity becomes less vivid. The discomfort becomes less vivid. What often remains are the positive memories. The safety, the companionship, the affection, the understanding, the emotional support. Slowly, the relationship can begin to look different from a distance than it did while they were inside it. This does not mean they are suddenly transformed. It simply means the emotional experience has changed. Many avoidants return because they genuinely miss the connection. They miss the comfort of knowing someone cared. They miss the feeling of being understood. They miss the emotional safety they once had access to. This is why people should be careful about assuming that every return is manipulative. Human emotions are rarely that simple. Missing someone can be very real. Regret can be very real. Loneliness can be very real. The desire to reconnect can be very real. But there is a crucial distinction that many people overlook. Missing someone and being ready for a healthy relationship are not the same thing. Missing someone is an emotion. Building a healthy relationship is a skill. Missing someone requires feelings. Maintaining a healthy relationship requires emotional maturity, communication, accountability, and consistency. These are completely different things. An avoidant can genuinely miss you and still repeat the exact same patterns that caused the relationship to fail before. They can sincerely care about you and still struggle with emotional closeness. They can return with good intentions and still create the same cycle of distance and confusion. This is why an avoidant returning is not automatic proof that they have changed. Many people desperately want to believe that a return means transformation. They want to believe the separation created growth. They want to believe the pain taught lessons. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes people really do change. Sometimes time apart creates self-awareness. Sometimes difficult experiences force personal growth. But growth cannot be assumed. Growth must be demonstrated. Real change leaves evidence behind. It appears in behavior. It appears in communication. It appears in accountability. It appears in actions repeated over time. Someone who has changed does not simply say they are different. They consistently show it. This is where emotions often create confusion. When someone you cared about suddenly returns, it is easy to focus on the fact that they came back. It feels meaningful. It feels important. It feels like confirmation that the connection mattered. And this is where many people make a painful mistake. The return itself creates excitement. The message appears. The call comes through. The conversation begins again. Suddenly, emotions that seemed buried start rushing back to the surface. Questions that felt unanswered suddenly seem close to resolution. Hope returns. Curiosity returns. Attachment returns. Even people who believed they had fully moved on can find themselves emotionally shaken by an avoidance return. Excitement is a natural reaction. Relief is a natural reaction. Hope is a natural reaction. These emotions are completely understandable. After all, many people spend a long time wondering whether an avoidant will ever come back. They spend countless nights searching for answers. They replay conversations. They analyze the breakup. They wonder if they mattered. Then one day the avoidant returns. In that moment, it can feel like every unanswered question is finally about to receive an answer. But emotions can create dangerous assumptions. One of the most common assumptions sounds simple. They came back, so everything will be different. This belief has caused countless people to walk directly back into painful cycles. The return feels like evidence of change. The return feels like proof of growth. The return feels like validation. Yet none of those things are guaranteed. Returning is easy. Consistency is hard. Sending a message takes a few seconds. Building trust can take months. Reaching out requires courage, but maintaining healthy communication requires discipline. Expressing regret can happen in a single conversation. Demonstrating change requires repeated actions over time. This is why many people become disappointed after giving another chance. In the beginning, everything feels different. Conversations feel exciting. Attention feels meaningful. Hope feels powerful. Both people want things to work. But eventually daily reality returns, stress returns, conflict returns, vulnerability returns, expectations return. And that is when true change becomes visible. Because anyone can be present when things feel easy. The real test begins when things become uncomfortable. Can they communicate during conflict? Can they stay emotionally available during difficult moments? Can they take responsibility when mistakes happen? Can they remain consistent when emotions become intense? These are the questions that reveal growth. Many people focus so much on the return that they forget to evaluate the pattern. Patterns matter more than promises. Patterns matter more than apologies. Patterns matter more than intentions. A pattern reveals what someone repeatedly chooses to do when life becomes complicated. Someone coming back is evidence of interest. It is not evidence of growth. That distinction can save people from years of repeated disappointment. Interest means they wanted contact. Interest means they thought about you. Interest means they felt drawn back toward the connection. Growth means they developed the emotional skills necessary to create a healthier dynamic. Those are very different realities. This is why it is important not to make decisions based solely on emotion. Excitement can be misleading. Relief can be misleading. Hope can be misleading. Strong emotions often encourage people to move quickly when patience would serve them better. The return should not automatically reopen every door that was previously closed. It should create observation. It should create questions. It should create evaluation. Unfortunately, many people respond in the opposite direction. Instead of slowing down, they react emotionally. Some become overly eager to reconnect. Others become consumed by anger, and anger can be just as dangerous as hope. Many people expect that rejecting an avoidant means making them suffer. They imagine dramatic speeches. They imagine finally delivering every painful thought they have carried for months. They imagine creating the same emotional pain they once experienced. On the surface, this feels empowering. It feels like justice. It feels like taking control. But anger often creates an illusion of strength while keeping emotional attachment alive. When someone still consumes your thoughts, still controls your emotions, and still influences your reactions, they continue to occupy space in your life. Anger may feel powerful, but it often keeps people emotionally connected to the very person they are trying to move beyond. This is why revenge rarely delivers the satisfaction people expect. The fantasy promises closure. The reality often creates more emotional exhaustion. Long speeches rarely create understanding. Many people spend hours preparing the perfect explanation, believing that if they finally express every hurt feeling, the other person will suddenly understand the damage they caused. Yet human beings rarely change because they receive a speech. Understanding does not guarantee growth. Awareness does not guarantee accountability. The desire to make someone fully understand your pain is understandable. But many people become trapped waiting for validation that never arrives. They want the avoidant to finally see everything clearly. They want them to fully appreciate what was lost. They want them to experience regret equal to the pain they caused. Yet healing rarely comes from controlling another person's emotional experience. Healing comes from reclaiming your own. This is why emotional rejection often backfires. Insults may provide temporary satisfaction, but they rarely create peace. Guilt trips may feel justified, but they rarely create healing. Attempts to punish someone often prolong emotional involvement rather than ending it. Some people reject avoidance by attacking their character. Others try to make them feel guilty. Others intentionally create emotional pain in return. The problem is that these reactions are still centered around the avoidant. The focus remains on changing their feelings rather than protecting your own well-being. Healthy rejection looks very different. Healthy rejection does not require cruelty. Healthy rejection does not require revenge. Healthy rejection does not require proving a point. It simply requires clarity. The strongest boundaries are often the quietest ones. They do not need dramatic explanations. They do not need emotional performances. They do not need endless justification. They simply communicate a decision and remain consistent. Because the goal isn't to hurt them. The goal is to protect yourself. And once that difference becomes clear, the entire situation begins to look different. Instead of asking how to make them feel what you felt, you begin asking what decision best serves your future. Instead of focusing on punishment, you focus on peace. Instead of trying to win, you focus on healing. And that shift changes everything that comes next. At this point, the most important thing you can do is slow down. Not because the avoidant came back, not because they deserve another chance, but because strong emotions often make people rush into decisions they later regret. One message can bring back months of memories. One conversation can awaken feelings that seemed completely gone. Suddenly the pain feels fresh again. The hope feels real again. The attachment feels alive again. That is why evaluation matters. Before deciding whether to reopen a door that once closed, you need to understand what is actually standing on the other side of it. Many people never stop to ask the questions that matter most. They become so focused on the fact that the avoidant returned that they forget to examine why they returned. Those are very different things. A return by itself is just an event. The reason behind the return is what reveals its meaning. One of the first questions worth asking is simple. What has actually changed? Not what they feel, not what they want, not what they miss. What has changed? Because if the relationship struggled before due to communication problems, emotional unavailability, inconsistency, fear of intimacy, or repeated withdrawal, those issues do not disappear simply because enough time has passed. Time alone does not create growth. Growth creates growth. This question often catches people off guard because it moves the conversation away from emotions and toward reality. Many returning avoidants can explain how much they missed you. They can explain how lonely they felt. They can explain how often they thought about you. But when asked what specifically changed inside them, the answer sometimes becomes unclear. That uncertainty matters, because people who have genuinely grown usually know what they worked on. They know what mistakes they made. They know what lessons they learned. They know which patterns they are trying to change. Growth leaves evidence behind. Another important question is this: why are they back now? At first glance, that may sound harsh, but it is actually a reasonable question. Human beings return to relationships for many reasons. Some return because they matured. Some return because they gained perspective. Some return because they finally recognize what they lost. Others return because they feel lonely. Others return because a new relationship failed. Others return because they miss familiarity. The motivation matters. Because not every return is driven by readiness. Sometimes it is driven by discomfort. And there is a huge difference between those two things. A person who is ready for a healthier relationship usually focuses on responsibility, accountability, and the future. A person who is simply uncomfortable often focuses on immediate emotional relief. Then comes another question: what have they learned? This question often reveals more than people expect. Learning changes how people view their past behavior. Learning creates self-awareness. Learning allows someone to recognize patterns they previously ignored. If a person cannot identify what they learned from the relationship, the separation, or the mistakes that occurred, it becomes difficult to trust that meaningful growth happened. This is not about expecting perfection. Nobody becomes perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has flaws. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. Someone who understands their mistakes has a foundation for change. Someone who cannot identify their mistakes is likely to repeat them. Another question worth asking is, what will be different this time? This question moves the conversation away from feelings and into behavior. Anyone can talk about wanting things to work. Anyone can express hope. Anyone can promise good intentions. The real issue is execution. What specific behaviors will be different? How will communication be handled differently? How will conflict be handled differently? How will emotional distance be handled differently? What happens when fear returns? What happens when vulnerability becomes uncomfortable again? These questions force reality into the conversation, because relationships do not succeed based on feelings alone. They succeed based on behavior. Then comes perhaps the most important question of all: can they take responsibility? Responsibility is one of the clearest indicators of emotional growth. People who have not grown often spend their energy explaining why they behaved the way they did. People who have grown spend their energy acknowledging the impact of what they did. Those may sound similar. They are not. One focuses on excuses. The other focuses on accountability. A person who constantly blames circumstances, stress, fear, timing, or other people may still be trapped in the same mindset that created the problem in the first place. A person who accepts responsibility demonstrates something much more valuable: self-awareness. And self-awareness is often the first step toward lasting change. This is why words alone should never be the deciding factor. Words are easy. Promises are easy. Apologies are easy. Partations are easy. Partals reveal the truth. Partals tell the story that words cannot. Partals reveal how someone behaves when life becomes stressful. Partals reveal how someone handles responsibility. Patterns reveal how someone responds to conflict. Parpars reveal whether change is real or simply being described. This is why one insight is worth remembering throughout the entire process. If they cannot explain their growth, they probably haven't grown. Growth leaves fingerprints. It leaves lessons. It leaves self-awareness. It leaves evidence. And once you begin looking for evidence instead of promises, your perspective starts to change. Suddenly, the return itself becomes less important than the reality behind it. And that shift creates a different kind of power, because now the decision is no longer being controlled by hope. It is being guided by clarity. For many people, clarity eventually leads to a difficult realization. The healthiest choice is not always reconciliation. Sometimes the healthiest choice is rejection, not angry rejection, not dramatic rejection, not emotional rejection, just clear rejection. This is where many people become confused. They assume rejection must be harsh to be effective. They assume rejection must be painful to be powerful. They assume strength requires confrontation. But true strength often looks much quieter. Healthy rejection is not about punishing another person. It is about honoring your own boundaries. It is about recognizing what is healthy for your future. It is about making decisions based on self-respect rather than emotion. When people think about rejecting someone who hurt them, they often picture dramatic conversations. They picture delivering the perfect speech. They picture finally saying everything they have been holding inside. Yet the most powerful rejection usually contains very little drama. It is calm. It is respectful. It is firm. It does not attack. It does not insult. It does not seek revenge. It simply communicates a decision. Stay calm. That matters more than most people realize. Calmness demonstrates emotional control. It demonstrates healing. It demonstrates that your choices are no longer being driven by old wounds. Stay respectful. Respect is not something you offer because someone earned it. Respect is something you offer because it reflects your character. You can reject someone without becoming cruel. You can set boundaries without becoming hostile. You can walk away without creating unnecessary damage. Stay firm. This is where many people struggle, because firmness requires consistency. It requires resisting emotional pressure. It requires remembering why the boundary exists in the first place. Many avoidants return with promises. Many return with emotions. Many return with regret. Those things can be genuine, but genuine feelings do not automatically require access to your life. That distinction is important. Do not negotiate your boundaries. Boundaries are not bargaining tools. They are standards. When a boundary becomes negotiable every time emotions appear, it stops functioning as a boundary. Many people spend years creating emotional standards only to abandon them the moment someone they care about returns. That decision often leads them back into the exact cycle they worked so hard to escape. Do not justify excessively. This may be one of the hardest lessons for people who value understanding. Many people feel a need to explain every detail of their decision. They want the other person to fully understand. They want them to agree. They want them to validate the choice. But boundaries do not require unanimous approval. A decision can be right for you even if another person dislikes it. A simple mindset often communicates more strength than a long explanation ever could. I appreciate you reaching out, but I have moved forward, and I don't want to repeat a cycle that hurt me. Notice what is missing. There is no attack, no accusation. No attempt to create guilt, no attempt to create pain, just clarity. And clarity is powerful because self-respect speaks quietly. It does not need to shout. It does not need to prove itself. It does not need validation. People often confuse loud reactions with strength, but genuine confidence rarely looks dramatic. It looks steady. It looks calm. It looks certain. And for many people, this becomes one of the most important moments of their entire healing journey. Because countless individuals spend years waiting for an avoidant to come back. They build fantasies around that moment. They believe everything will finally make sense. They believe closure will arrive. They believe happiness will return. They believe the pain will disappear. The return becomes a symbol of validation, a symbol of worth, a symbol of being chosen. For months or even years, they tell themselves that everything will feel different once that person comes back. Then one day it happens. The message arrives, the call arrives, the conversation begins. And something unexpected occurs. They discover they no longer need what they once wanted. At first, this realization can feel confusing. For so long, the return seemed important. For so long, it seemed like the answer. But healing changes people. Healing changes priorities. The things that once felt essential no longer feel necessary. The things that once felt impossible become manageable. The emotional dependence slowly disappears. Growth changes standards. A person who spent months developing self-respect often starts viewing relationships differently. They stop asking who wants them. They start asking who deserves them. They stop asking how to avoid abandonment. They start asking whether the connection is healthy. They stop measuring love by intensity. They start measuring it by consistency. That shift changes everything, because standards determine decisions. And growth creates new standards. Then comes another powerful transformation. Self-worth changes decisions. When self-worth is low, people often tolerate behavior they know is unhealthy. They accept inconsistency. They accept confusion. They accept emotional unavailability. They accept treatment that leaves them constantly questioning their value. But as self-worth grows, those choices become harder to justify. Not because the person becomes cold. Not because they stop caring, but because they finally begin caring about themselves too. That is why the return of an avoidant often becomes a turning point. Not because the avoidant changed everything, but because the person waiting changed everything. The individual who once begged for another chance may now prefer peace. The individual who once chased explanations may now value clarity. The individual who once feared letting go may now recognize their own strength. And in that moment, a profound truth becomes impossible to ignore. Their return doesn't prove your value. Your ability to walk away proves that you finally know it. That realization rarely arrives all at once. It develops slowly, through pain, through reflection, through growth, through difficult choices. And once it arrives, relationships stop feeling like a search for validation and start feeling like a reflection of standards. That is often the moment a person realizes they are no longer waiting to be chosen. They have finally chosen themselves. As we come to the end of this discussion, remember the lesson that so many people learn only after years of confusion, heartbreak, and waiting. Avoidants often come back. Sometimes they come back because they miss you. Sometimes they come back because they regret losing you. Sometimes they come back because distance gave them a new perspective. But their return alone does not automatically mean they have changed. A message is not growth. An apology is not growth. Even regret is not growth. Real growth is revealed through consistent actions, accountability, emotional maturity, and the willingness to do things differently over time. It is also important to remember that anger is not strength. Many people believe the strongest response is making someone feel the same pain they caused. They believe revenge will finally bring peace. But revenge rarely heals old wounds. It usually keeps those wounds open. True healing begins when your focus shifts away from controlling another person's emotions and toward protecting your own well-being. That is where boundaries become so powerful. Boundaries are not walls built from hate. They are acts of self-respect. They are reminders that your peace matters, your feelings matter, and your future matters. Sometimes the strongest rejection is not saying, "You hurt me." It is saying, "I learned from what happened. I wish you well, but I won't abandon myself again." Because the moment you stop choosing people who repeatedly walk away is often the moment you finally choose yourself, and that choice changes everything. It changes the relationships you accept. It changes the standards you live by. It changes the way you see your own value. One day, the person you waited for may return. One day, the message you thought about for months or even years may finally arrive. But when that moment comes, the goal is not to prove your worth to them. The goal is to remember your worth for yourself. The goal is not to be chosen. The goal is to choose what is healthy, peaceful, and right for your life. If this video helped you see avoidant behavior, healing, and self-respect from a new perspective, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep insights into psychology, relationships, attachment styles, and personal growth. Also, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who may be struggling to let go of a painful cycle. You never know who might need this message today. And remember this, the people who change your life are not always the ones who stay. Sometimes the people who change your life are the ones who teach you the value of never losing yourself again. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.